Our next speaker is Dr. Ken Swanberg. This is a change from the program. Dr. Swanberg is a very experienced agricultural economist, specialised in smallholder agriculture, extension, nutrition, marketing, and has worked for the last 10 years in agribusiness and processing. He's a very experienced person. He has 60 publications. He's worked in as many as 62 countries. And since 1996, up until 2000, he spent most of his time in Egypt working on competitiveness for the textile industry as a precursor to privatisation. So he's going to talk to us on privatisation, promoting viable and sustainable agribusiness privatisation. And I'm very pleased to invite him to speak to you.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be back here in Egypt after about a year and a half. And I'd like to talk about the textile sector. And I'm going to be making some remarks that are, you might say, in response to Dr. Ibrahim Sadiq's comments that you heard yesterday. Let me start off by saying let's be clear in our goals for the textile sector. And the question here, and it's a question everywhere, can we be competitive in textiles? 2 years ago, many of us met here and heard Hani al-Habibi, our conference leader, proclaim that the sleeping giant was awakening. And I worked here for 5 years to create competitiveness for the textile sector as a prerequisite for privatization. And I'm haunted by what the textile sector has not been able to do, and I'm elated by some of the things that we have been able to do. Is the sleeping giant awake? Maybe so, but he or she is still walking around in a daze, not fully awake. And I keep saying, wake up, wake up. I could bore you, I think, with my academic paper that I prepared on the pitfalls of rapid privatization and how Prime Minister Atif Abid has taken a go-slow, cautious approach to try and avoid the mistakes that we've seen all over the former Soviet Union. And I could describe those approaches that we've adapted to Egypt to show you the successes and the failures of each in the agribusiness sector. I stay with agribusiness. I don't go into chemicals or pharmaceuticals or utilities, etc. I'm in agribusiness. The most prominent techniques that we've used here in Egypt have been leasing contracts, management contracts, employee takeovers, management buyouts, IPOs, and anchor investors. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I want to discuss with you our real objectives and see what we can do to realize them. So let me put up on the board here our objective. To find ways to use our basic resources from within the country to generate as much income as is possible through creating jobs by transforming these resources into consumable goods at remunerative rates. Now, what do I mean by remunerative rates? I mean be able to pay their factor costs. So we don't lose money, we make money on all of the factors. Now, there have been people who've said that we can do this by just providing for the domestic market. But I think to really be truly competitive, we're going to have to go to the export market. So we're going to ask, is that possible in textiles? But before we get into the textiles, let me put up some profiles from some other industries in other countries just to illustrate my point. Let's start with leather in Armenia. Now, what you see down on the bottom is what the farmer gets for the hide. And then what they were telling me in Armenia is that we should sell wet blues. That's the first process. And look how little value is gained there, up to $5. But Armenia used to make shoes, used to make jackets that made out of leather for the whole Soviet Union. And they have an industry there just waiting to get more leather and start their textile industry. And so my contention is that you should do all of the value-added processing within Armenia. Let's switch to cacao or chocolate in Ecuador. Here, the farmer gets very little once again, and most of the people in Ecuador export unfermented beans. Who gains all the rest of that? That's gained in Europe or in the United States, all of that income, up to the price of $8. An interesting aside in Ecuador, where I was a couple of weeks ago, Professor Su was talking about the fact that he was working with the fashion design of those, the ethnic Indians in different parts of Ecuador. I was down there designing alternative agriculture to replace coca that's used for cocaine. We're trying to keep cocaine from coming down from Colombia and penetrating Ecuador. A little bit dicier activity than what he was involved with. I also looked at coffee in Ecuador, and it's even worse in coffee. The farmer gets such a tiny portion compared to what you and I pay for a cup of coffee. There we have Robusta coffee, and we have Arabica coffee. Then I looked at wood in Gabon, and when people come in to harvest the trees, they will pay the farmer for what they think is standing in a tree, what we call standing lumber. But when you start processing that lumber and start making floors like you see here, or making a furniture piece like this, the price is astronomical. All of that's made in the United States or in Europe. It's not made in the country. And I said, it takes nothing to make that in that country. It's a simple machine, and the people have the ability to do it. So then we come to cotton in Egypt. And we heard yesterday, and we've heard another time, that we should sell our Barbadance lint. Okay? Go back. Oh, you're not there. Okay, there. Okay? The raw material down at the bottom, that blue portion, is what we would get for this country if we sold the lint. The next portion up, the kind of a maroon color, that's what we would get if we sell the yarn. We were talking yesterday about selling the yarn. But if we process that into finished garments, we make a lot more money for this country, and most of that is in labor. This one is for carded yarn, Gisa 83. The next one is for combed yarn, Gisa 89. You notice that the price keeps going up, and we keep making more and more in our country. It seems to me that something just jumps out at you. If we can be experts in the production of our raw material cotton, why can't we be experts in all of the processing? Most of the people here today are talking about the technologies that are used to process this cotton into finished goods. Why can't we do that here in this country and capture all of that value-added income here? Yesterday we had a presentation that tried to give you a reason probably for why we can't be competitive in processing cotton yarns. Dr. Sadiq presented the results of a study, a fairly in-depth study, that showed that Egypt's cost for producing coarse count yarns are higher than the TCF export price, and much higher than the international price for the Indian cottons of similar quality. However, I would like to present their data in a little different way. But first I'd like to say something about the price of the raw material before I get into the yarns. When I first arrived here in 1996, there was a hue and a cry that the cotton subsidy that was given to the farmers forced us to fix export prices that were above the international price for Pima, and that it limited our exports. Well, we've worked a long time, and Dr. Sadiq and Edgar Ariza-Nino, who was doing the working of the machine yesterday, have worked very hard with Amina Bassa and others, and we've kind of liberalized that the cotton production and export marketing system, so that's working fairly well. So we've got appropriate pricing. But the second thing that's happened, well, a couple of years ago, everybody was saying that the exchange rate was overvalued, and that's why we weren't exporting enough of our products. Well, now we've seen about a 36% devaluation. Okay, as an economist then, I say, if you have devaluation, what should be your recommendation? Well, that recommendation has always been, as far as I know, that you should export products that you produce in this country, meaning our cotton. So we should find ways to take that cotton and process it and export it as a finished good. So I looked at this data from a different perspective. One of the things that was pointed out by Dr. Siddiqui yesterday was that he had financing costs, administrative costs, and manufacturing costs. And in that manufacturing cost, if you went into the study in detail, there were some other financing costs for holding inventory at one point. So I took all the financing costs out and I took the administrative costs out. And using the exchange rate at the time of that study, which was 3.85, I came up with the following costs and compared them with the TCF export price. And I then calculated what would be the profit per kilogram or the loss per kilogram. And what I found was this light blue portion on top. And as we go through from count 20 with GISA 83, and the next one, count 30, count 40, we go from carded yarn to combed yarn, we find that there is a profit for every one of those yarns. Then I said, well, what happens when you factor in the devaluation? Since this was at 3.85 to the dollar, now it's about 4.62 to the dollar. What happens then if you don't, if you keep those same prices in pounds and do the recalculation? We get the next set to the 2.4. We find that our profit increases significantly. We can go through the same way, the 30, the 40, into the combed yarns. The profit keeps expanding by quite some bit. Okay? What I found was that even at the low count levels that Dr. Ibrahim was talking about yesterday, our costs here are $1.95 per kilogram, and the corresponding Indian price is $2.10. We even make money with regard to the Indian yarns. I think that's quite startling. Then I said, if we're going to do some reorganization and we're going to create some competitiveness and we're going to create a logo and we're going to increase demand, we're going to privatize some of these firms, we're going to get better management, even if we just take our current management and do some training, we're going to at least have a 10% reduction in price or in cost to this yarn. And if we do that, we get another set. Also increased earnings to our yarns. Okay. If we use this profit that we calculated at the 3.85 exchange rate, and even if we take off what we call the administrative costs, which are sales force costs and other administrative overhead, but not the financing, I said, let's calculate what we would make in a firm that is producing 10 tons of yarn per day, 300 days a year. And I came out with the next table. Here are just some comparisons of the earnings rates. But I have returns to a factory. And it comes out to about $3 million before the administrative costs, and then when you take those off, it's about $2.6 million. This is the figure then that you compare to your capital costs. and you use that to take care of your financing, which is what Ibrahim was talking about yesterday. So it makes quite a bit of money for just about any one of these factories that we have here in Egypt. Now, I'm not naive to think that we haven't had a recession in the textile industry. Over the last year or so, it's been hard hit, and 9/11 didn't help anything. It was exacerbated. In fact, the firm that has been working with us on the logo in the United States, West Point Stevens, I think their prices dropped from $100 a share to $10 a share, and they almost went into bankruptcy. The textile industry has been pretty hard hit. But if you remember from Mr. Stroll's presentation yesterday, and he showed how the industry has taken a downturn. After every downturn, there was quite a remarkable and rapid upturn. And I think we've had our downturn, and I think we're ready to improve in terms of our market for the future. And he mentioned this concept of innovative management. And I think this is very popular in the discussions of competitiveness at the moment also. And we know that if you go in the United States and you just look at the major manufacturers, we find that Egyptian cotton is very prominent. Not only in your shirts and blouses and things like that, but also in sheets and towels, the very coarse count yarns. Even at J.C. Penney's, one of the lower level companies in the United States, is highly featured Egyptian cotton. So if we can capture all of the value added in this country, in our textile industry, we will be generating quite a bit of income. Just going through these charts once again, all of that value added up to that sale price could be captured here in this country. So what do we have to do? How do we get there? Before I mention what I kind of say is a recommendation, I want to throw in another idea. We're stretching it a little bit, but we've got flax in this country. And Mahal el-Kobra uses the flax or linen to do a linen and cotton blend. And there are some people in the Ministry of Agriculture and others here who are trying to revitalize the flax industry. So we could have the flax textile industry or linen industry as well as the cotton. And we also have quite a bit of leather, and there's a firm institute from the UK that is here relocating some of the tanneries into a central area and doing some research to improve the leather industry as well, which I consider another part of the textile industry. And we have a young man, scientist by the name of Hesham Grease down in Asyut, who has bred probably the best hybrid silkworms in the world. I've been there at his place when Chinese have been there and have looked with large eyes saying, how could you produce cocoons of this size and of this color? And the whole silk industry could be revitalized in this country. Some of you know that we also have a jute factory, and we produce jute here. So the textile portfolio, the one I forgot, and you have to help me with the name again. We have a sheep out near the Libyan border. It produces a very high quality white wool, and it is called Rahman, this variety of sheep. Maybe we could even get into some of the wool textiles. If we were to become competitive in textiles, in my judgment, we should be competitive in all of these products, not just cotton. So how do we do it? The first thing I think is to make sure that everybody's on the same strategy. And this is to keep Egyptian cotton for processing into final good products in Egypt. Just do it in Egypt. The second thing is to improve the efficiency of cotton production. And And some of the people who were here yesterday from the German group GTZ, who are one of our sponsors, have done quite a bit of study in cotton textile production technology. We need to get that extended. We have probably one of the most famous research institute, the Cotton Research Institute, that's doing breeding. We need to continue to do that and to get these the production improved. Minister Saidi yesterday mentioned that they're developing a new R&D center for textile processing, and we have various faculties of textiles here in this country: Alexandria, Helwan, Menifee, Cairo. We can have exchanges with North Carolina State. They've got about 15, 20, 25 people here at this conference. And I'm sure there are many others of you who would love to work with the Egyptians on the technology side. We have a fashion center here. Once again, Minister Saidi said that they've signed a contract with a fashion center in Italy to help revitalize that. This center was designed by the Fashion Institute of Technology, where George and Jeff come from. So that's another area that we need to work on. The fifth area is to formalize what the competitiveness people call the cluster, where everybody's working together. This meeting is one attempt to do that. We've had many others. We have several associations that work in the textile area, and we need to promote that. And at the end, what I say is that we have to shout at the top of our lungs. We're going to become competitive. We're going to become world famous again. And wake up, you sleeping giant. Wake up. Thank you.
We have time for one or two questions or comments. Personally, I think it's a very exciting, stimulating paper. Does anybody have any questions for Ken? Over here. Could you use the microphone, please?
I would like to ask Dr. Abdel Fattah, is the needle punch concerning non-moving in textile, or is it for fabric as well? Thank you.
You're supposed to ask Dr. Kim. I couldn't hear the question because I thought you guys would ask him. Can you repeat the question, please? No.
I'm asking in general about needle punching in textile. Is it concerning needle punching in carpet business or as well as in textiles for light fabric?
I can't hear you. The voice is not clear at all. I can't hear anything.
بس السؤال دلوقتي needle punch. It is you are talking about in carpet business as a non-woven or in a fabric or light shade fabric.
Okay. The needle punching, I was talking about the carpeting. The needle punching is going to come very strongly at the woven carpet and going to take a lot of markets from it. We talk about two colors. It can do two colors so far. Dr. Nagawi, you are from Oriental Weavers, and you have a leg doing weaving. You know, you are putting two legs, one here and one there. You are doing needle punching and you're doing carpet weaving as well, which is a good thing to do. You have to have both, and you have to see if you can go to carpet marketing using needle punching, fine. If you can do weaving, fine. So this is a smart way to do. We already joined a long time ago. Like I was saying, if you can beat them, join them. You already joined. And I think, you know, needle bunching is going to be competitive in carpet again. That's, I hope I answered your question.
Any further comments or questions? I would just like to ask Ken a question myself. We have very similar parallels in New Zealand between the production of wool and the national imperative to process more of it. The question is, as the cost structure rises in the country, would you advocate further processing of the natural products in all cases, or only depending on the fundamental competitiveness? I mean, can it all be driven off the design of new products, or is it necessary to be able to hit the commodity price structure?
Well, obviously, you would have to look at each stage and do an analysis like we did on the yarn, cost of processing the yarn. And when the cost was above the price, as it was presented yesterday, there was a lot of concern that we should not be doing the coarse count yarn. But as we reanalyzed that, we came to different conclusions, so that we showed that we could be competitive in production and in yarn production. We have not done an in-depth analysis of the weaving, finishing, and apparel, but we know that the apparel has gone very well in this country, so we know that that's profitable. And it just seems, as we look at those charts on the value added that is gained, that we should be able to do each of those components relatively cost efficient. And most of the input cost in those, maybe not on the finishing, I'm not so sure there, but on the weaving and the ready-made will be labor. And I'm sure that we can do the labor. Our labor costs are not that high, so we can be competitive from that point of view. But the point is that there is so much. I mean, you just look at the value. If you're going to export the product at $15 to $20 a kilogram compared to $2, we need to really seriously look at that difference, because that's where you're going to generate the employment and the income for this country and meet its growth targets.
I thought it was a very interesting presentation of the problem of agricultural producers being price takers at the bottom of that value chain, and the possibility for further processing up until maybe there's a point where you're not competitive, but capturing more further down the chain is very interesting analysis.
But remember what was said by Mr. Strolz yesterday, and it's very prominent in the competitiveness literature, that if you export commodities, somebody else is going to export that commodity cheaper, and you're going to continuously lose if you export commodities. What you have to do, remember that chart he had, and it had the different circles in it, you have to move up to the right-hand corner. And as you get into that corner, and that's what we're talking about, how to move out of the commodity market and into that portion of the market.
Really interesting. Do you have a question?
My name is Jiao Chen from Textile Department, UMIXT, England. I have a question to the professor from NC State on the weaving. It is very interesting to see that you compare the woven fabric and the non-woven fabric in that fashion. And it's very interesting to see that trousers, a pair of trousers made from new material. But what's your view on the non-woven materials' other performance properties, such as the tensile, shear, the enormous properties we would see in the woven fabric? Do you think one day the non-woven fabric will completely replace the woven fabric? And you also mentioned if you can't beat them, join them, what do you mean? Do you think the weaving technology will disappear or not?
I think, like I said, what we have seen in the last 30 years, moving from a fabric that cannot be used, non-woven talking about in the 70s, it was waste industry. What happened in 30 years was amazing. Nobody would predict that would take place. I worked with non-woven myself since I was undergrad student, and I have seen the changes. I have always worked with non-woven while I'm working with. And like I said, I think the commodity fabric by 110 will be taken by 110 from women. And we've already seen this. You can touch this and see this. It's really very amazing. The hydro tank also can do what the weaving or wood can't do. There are many things that can be done by the hydro tank that the weaving industry would produce a chemical. What we see now, we like the weaving. It has been traditionally taken over our body, right? This will come up with new features, new appearance that you may accept it in the future. Commodity fabric will be taken very shortly. In the future, I cannot tell you, but I'm going to tell you, non-woven industry is very intelligent industry. And I'm predicting them to take over. Maybe they can reduce designs. They can reduce right now 3D designs on the fabric. They can take woven fabric and hit it with the jets, and they can make flowers, 3D flowers, for example, or things like that.
Thank you very much.